Tēnā koutou katoa, e tiwi whānui tai mai nei i raro i te tāhuhu o te whare, tēnei whare, te whare wānanga o Waikato. Ka nui te mea atu ki a koutou, nau mai, hara mai, whakatau mai. He mihi ki te atu, e whakakororea tōna ingoa, he mihi ki te ariki nui a te kingi Māori a tūheitia. E noho mai rā i rungi i te ahureo tapu o na mātua tupuna, a kei te mihi ki ai o ti rā. O tōna whare kāhu i ariki nui toru. Rire hau, pai marire kia rātau, pai marire kia tātou. Kia ora no, e hoa mā, welcome to the University of Waikato, welcome to our afternoon session. Ko ai au, ko Robert Joseph tōku ingoa, te taha ki taku mātua, ko Ngāti Maniapoto, Ngāti Tūwhare tō, te taha ki taku whaia, ko Ngāti Kahungunu me Ngaitonga. Nō nei roku whanaunga, tēnā koutou. So I'm from here, from Ngāti Maniapoto on my father's side, and from the east coast on my mother's line. I'm one of the lecturers here at the School of Faculty of Law, the Kingitanga Faculty of Law, and I'll be chairing our session as well as presenting. We've got a dynamic lineup, actually, and acknowledge that this is the graveyard session, so people are somewhat tired, but the dynamism of our presenters will keep you going. And so, our kaupapa today, whānau, is we're looking at this concept, te mana whatu ahuru, blending of mana, particularly in the Māori governance space. Mentioned my background. Unfortunately, one of our presenters can't be here, Dr. Tom Roa from Ngāti Maniapoto. His sister is not well, and she's not looking at seeing the week out, so he's with the whānau there. So we give his apologies. However, kei te pai, the path will unfold as we go. So I have to pick up on a few things he was going to talk about, but he was going to introduce our session. So I'm going to have to do that, so you have to bear with me here. But can I have a show of hands? Can anyone tell us if you are familiar with this term or with this concept, mana whatu ahuru? Anyone familiar with that term before, heard it before? From what we know from our research, it appears to be I guess the wording specific to Ngāti Maniapoto, but the idea, the concept is universal around Māoridom. So I'll just quickly introduce that, then I'll introduce our other presenters. Ka pai? So what we're looking at today is we acknowledge ngā pai o te māramatanga, the Māori Core Centre of Research Excellence, stationed, headquartered at Auckland University, but collaborating with a whole bunch of our institutions. And they actually funded us for this project we're going to talk about today. The project is a project called Te Pai Tāwhiti. And what our kaupapa was about, whānau? What our kaupapa was about was we're looking at all the Māori organisations around the motu for Te Ture Whenua Māori Act trusts. Anyone know how many Māori land trusts there are under Te Ture Whenua Māori regime? Any guesses? Okay, good guess. It's about 8,000. 8,000 trusts. So we've got all these trusts. It's about 5% of the landmass of New Zealand, about 1.5 million hectares. Most of them are in the North Island. A huge concentration of them are in the Waiariki area. So our kaupapa for our project was about looking at these Māori organisations. A couple of reports were done recently that looked at Māori land trusts, Māori assets, and how there's a lot of assets there, but they're not performing as they could be economically. So our thesis, as it were, was how do you enhance Māori economic performance of Māori organisations? And what we specifically looked at in our project was collaboration or aggregation. It makes sense, makes total business sense for Māori organisations to come together and work together to build scale so that they're not duplicating services, so that they're not competing with each other and so on and so forth. And our second presenter is going to elaborate more on that. But our kaupapa was, how do you get Māori organisations to collaborate and to collaborate effectively? Right? So you think about that question, how do you get Māori organisations to come together for certain projects? Now, I put it to you, did we do that traditionally? What's this tikanga? Tikanga Māori, did we work together and collaborate for certain things, certain projects? Right? If you look at our tikanga, there's some grossly simplified tikanga values and principles, but one of them is kotahitanga and mana, protecting our mana. Right? Kotahitanga is about unity and collaboration. There are numerous historic examples of this, such as the Kingitanga. When we look at the Kingitanga, officially established in 1858, right? But there was a lot of work going in beforehand, before that. But as you know, in 1858, when the Kingitanga was established, what was the main purpose or purposes of the Kingitanga? Can anyone tell us? What was the main kaupapa of the Kingitanga? We're celebrating, yes. Yeah. So, kotahitanga, right? Unity. Okay. So, collaboration, bring them together. There's also something else about it too. You don't remember the other sort of main pillar, as it were, of the Kingitanga? Stop the land sales. By 1860, most of the land in the South Island had already been sold. A few parcels were left. In the North Island, land was already sold, and a lot of it in Auckland, New Plymouth, Hawke's Bay, Wellington. So the land was disappearing very fast, and the people up this way thought, "Hey, we need to stop those land sales." One way to do that is the Kingitanga, right? We unite together, and also we place our land under the mana of the king. And that's what they did, right? And so it wasn't that they gave over their mana to the king, but the land was going to be protected as a trustee, as it were. Right? But that's an example of the tribes coming together, acknowledging it wasn't all the tribes, but it was a number of them, high number of them. And when they came together for the Battle of Rotokau, actually, even before that, remember the Declaration of Independence up north? That was an example of collaboration too. The tribes up in the north, all the way down to here, and actually Te Hapuku was part of that as well. He signed up to that from Kahungunu. So that's another example of the tribes collaborating. For those who didn't subscribe to the Kingitanga, what did they subscribe to? Te Riti o Waitangi are sort of over both groups, but there was another main organisation that was established. Anyone remember which one it was? That's right, Paremata Māori. Right. Paremata Māori o Kotahitanga down in Wairarapa Moana. That was established with the upper house, lower house, passing laws and so on. But that was collaboration of the tribes. And actually today we still collaborate. We're still fiercely tribal. But one of the few times we do really well in collaborating is the rugby, right? Okay. Not the sevens though. Hopefully we'll get back to that. So anyway, there's a lot of historic examples of collaboration. Okay. Now, if we come to the wars that were fought here, coming back to Manu Whatuahuru, sorry, I'll go real fast and give my colleagues some time here. After the Battle of Rotokau was fought here in Kihiki on the 2nd of April, Māori withdrew from this area, and the Punu River became a geopolitical boundary. That was the Raupatu, okay, Raupatu boundary. And then what happened was the Kingitanga and a lot of the tribes south of this area, they formed Te Rohe Pōtai. And as you recall, Te Rohe Pōtai from 1864, the Pūniu became a geopolitical boundary, and this was actually the whole boundary was an aukati. And as you recall, an aukati is a political border that can't be crossed. And this black boundary here was the aukati, actually the brown one. It goes all the way down to Lake Taupo, Taumarunui, Parininihi, and it went 20 miles out to sea too. That's what they actually did. So that's Te Rohe Pōtai. That was a type of state within a state. Right? And with respect, from 1864 to 1889, no Europeans were allowed in that area by penalty of death. Right? And the king and a lot of the tribes, they had soldiers patrolling all along this area. Okay? A couple of missionaries and others tried to cross that boundary and were executed, including John Waitiri, and others. Right? But that was an aukati, that was Te Rohe Pōtai, not well known in New Zealand history, but they had their own laws, their own taxation system, own trade, everything. The strength of this Rohe Pōtai was their unity, right? How they stayed together. And they held off until 1889. What broke it up was disunity. So they collaborated together, worked together, and that was their strength. The Native Land Court and the railway broke it up. Right? And so what the political leaders at the time did was they started playing the leaders off against each other. I won't say who was the first one or who was the ones who gave in, but it broke up with the railway going through, the main trunkway from Auckland to Wellington. Right? But what Māori did was said, ka whawhai tōna mātou, we'll keep fighting for our rights. Now, so Ngāti Maniapoto, the tribe, was part of that, a central part of Te Rohe Pōtai. So they were united and strong. After the breakup of Te Rohe Pōtai, they were separated and they were struggling as a people. In 1904, the Maniapoto leaders, in the spirit of the past leaders, particularly these three and others, they called a big hui at Te Māhui, outside Te Kuiti, in 1904 to try and bring the tribe together. And the whole kaupapa of their tribe was unity of Maniapoto. And at the end of it, a couple of days, they came up with a kawenata, a covenant. This was just before New Year's. Took them about 3 days to draft it, so it's quite quick. It's all in Māori. It's quite beautiful too. But the kawenata o Ngāti Maniapoto me ona hapu. It starts off to bring the people together. They start off with Eo Mātua, go through all the whakapapa down to Hoturoa, down to Raukawa, Rereahu, Maniapoto, then out to all the hapu. Right? So they do the whakapapa first, which is tika. And then they went through the rohe, the different leaders and so on, to try and bring the tribes together. But an interesting term that went right through the kawenata is this term, mana whatu ahuru. So they refer to it a lot here. Tom Roa, who's an expert translator of Māori, what he did, so he took a term and said, Tom, what does this term mean? And Tom said, from his translation, he says, mana is protecting, individual and collective, protect your mana, but mana whatu ahuru is a blending of everyone's mana. So we protect and respect your mana, but for certain things we need to come together and blend that mana. And that's what this term means, that's where it comes from, and that's what Ngāti Maniapoto are using today as they start going into their treaty settlement process. Mana whatu ahuru, we need to blend our mana and come together. Right? So whānau, that's just a bit of background to our session this afternoon. That's where it comes from, and being mana whenua, it's appropriate. What we're going to do now is look at, our project was how do you get Māori organisations to blend together for better purposes. Okay? And our next presenter is Jonathan Kilgour. He's from Ngāti Rereahu, from Ngarauru and Ngaitahu. He completed a Bachelor of Law here at Waikato, and then a Masters of Law. He also did an MBA. He is the trustee of a number of land trusts, and he's currently working out at Hopuopu at Waikato Endowed College, among other places. He has his own consulting company too, but he's part of our team, and he's going to talk to us about some of the theory and frameworks for collaboration.
Tēnā tātou. Okay, is that working better now? Tēnā tātou. He mihi kawa atu kia koutou kua taumai rungi te kapapa o tēnei kawhau. Heri tēnei no Rereahu, no Ngāti Maniapoto, no ngā rauru hoki. Ka pōhehe etahi no Te Arawa hau, I te mea e tupaki au I Wainganui a Te Arawa, engari no Rereahu tonua hau. So as Robert talked about, I'm talking about collaboration in more the theory in a contemporary context. So really talking about the idea of collaborative governance in a Māori dynamic. And in a way, this was an element of the project Te Pai Tawhiti, which we undertook with Pikiao. So the idea here really is about collaboration amongst multiple existing entities across the iwi and hapu ecosystem to deliver something of common purpose or common strategy. In this sense, it isn't amalgamation, which is more the formal merging of organisations. Collaboration instead being where the organisations maintain their identity and their own mana, but work together for a common purpose. So really what I'm talking about is an understanding of what collaborative governance is, and also around the conditions and processes that make collaboration successful. So this diagram is kind of a conceptualisation of the iwi hapu ecosystem, of that space, of the organisations and principles within that ecosystem. So you have your traditional leadership, but in an organisational sense you can have a number of different organisations with different purposes, with different shareholdings and so forth. And so you have the likes of runanga, trust boards, post-settlement governance entities, and multitude of land trusts. And some of these overlap, some of them don't. And for example, you have incorporations which can bridge across iwi and hapu as well. And so this space gets quite complex quite quick. And also when you also look at it in terms of scale, you have small trusts, you have large trusts, and you also have collaborations outside of the iwi and hapu space as well. So this brings a number of complex dynamics when talking about collaboration in that space. Theorists have tried to plot collaboration, these are mainstream theorists, have tried to plot collaboration along a continuum. And so down one end, which is the turf end, you have organisations more in isolation, and you have those who work together on this other end at the trust end. And so collaboration is more at the trust end, but it isn't quite amalgamation where the organisations formally merge. But this type of scale helps to show how trust is a big component of collaboration, that organisations and leaders and people need that sense of trust when they start working together at that end of the scale. In terms of motivations to collaborate, mainstream Western theory talks largely about 6 motivators, so they can be to improve efficiency, performance, share resources or increase capacity, but also about leveraging power and preventing strategic threats. But through Te Pai Tawhiti, which we conducted over the last 2 years, We also looked at what motivated people to collaboration, and so quite often they pointed to a crisis or to an opportunity. So of course a crisis motivates people to actually change because there's a threat that is imminent. An opportunity is a bit harder because you have to sell that opportunity, and so building that trust and commitment to that can be a bit more complicated. We also looked at He Mango Pare Amo here, the Māori Economic Development report that Graham Smith and his team at Awanuiarangi did last year. And so they talked about collaboration as being important to Māori economic development, but they separated it into collaborations which are more project specific and relationships which are more enduring but are informed by tikanga and values. And so they kind of created this binary between kind of mana conversations and the relationships and the mahi conversations and collaboration. And while we agreed with this, we also thought of it in more of a continuum as well. And so in the middle, you kind of have things which are strategic, but don't actually deliver on particular outputs. So in that particular space, you might find things like the iwi Leaders Group. So mainstream theory, essentially the idea of collaborative governance is multiple parties working together in a deliberate sense, in a consensus-based way, for common good or a common goal. In terms of strategy, it looks something like this. So if on that end, to my right, your left, if organisations aren't working together, there can be disorder, competing purposes, crossing over and working at ends with each other. Or slightly better, in isolation, they may not be interfering with each other's space, but they're not necessarily delivering the same goal. But that's more in isolation of each other. Whereas at the other end, you're looking more at working in collaboration, which can be working together towards a common goal, but not necessarily delivering the most impact on that. Or like where this collective impact space is, really agreeing on the outcomes and trying to deliver on that outcome while understanding each organisation's purpose, perspective and what they can deliver best to achieve the outcome. So the language there is around collective impact. Have many people here heard of collective impact or social impact? It kind of has a lot of currency at the moment in social entrepreneurship. So it comes out of Stanford, essentially. The model is about finding the conditions for collaboration to work across multiple organisations on complex issues. The understanding with this is that there's some issues that are so complex that no one organisation can deliver an effective outcome in respect of that. And so instead of working in isolation, that you try and work together and you come to an agreement about what you're trying to achieve and where everybody participates in that process. I'm not going to go too much more into that one, but that's one model that's out there. The Ministry of Primary Industries has also put out a model that was put out on their website about 2 months ago. And what they've provided is a similar type of language, but with a process, a six-stage process for trusts and whānau to start working together, starting with having cups of tea with each other, which is an important part of the process, and really building some momentum towards something which is more formalised as a collaboration. So if you put all those together and some of the learnings, especially from Western theory, but also some of the things that we observed in Te Pai Tawhiti, some of the variables there that influence the collaboration include history. So for us as Māori, we know whānau that we work well together with because of intergenerational connection, but also those that we find difficult to work with for the same reasons. So those types of things can influence whether collaboration takes place or not, or some of the things that you need to manage around for collaboration. But really it's about finding the incentives to actually participate together. So again, we're revisiting that point about crisis or opportunity. Understanding the power balance and the dynamic is important. You may have some trusts who are really big and perform really well, but you have others who don't have capacity to even engage in the conversation. So these dynamics you have to work with as well. Through our investigation with Te Pai Tawhiti, we found that leadership was really important. So collaborations take time to build. It takes many cups of tea over many years to actually come to an agreement, even to move forward. And so leadership can be really important to collaboration. In terms of critical factors, really trust and building commitment is really key to getting there. I put up there whakanoa. It's kind of that process of becoming comfortable with each other, and really in our tikanga we have ways of building that, so face to face and so forth. But really what you're trying to build is that shared understanding of where you want to head. But that last point there is also important about achieving those small wins. So with collaboration, you don't want to be 2 years down the track and go, well, what use was that, because you've got nothing to prove moving forward. So it is really important to define at the outset what you're trying to achieve and trying to create some measurability around that so that you can demonstrate the wins in collaboration. And also for those who don't participate from the outset, they can see the value and potentially join in at a later stage if they want to. Another key point, and I won't go into all of these, but fit for purpose legal form. With those organisations at the beginning, they all have their own constitution and own purpose. They may not match with where you're heading with the collaboration, so it's part of being honest about whether you need a new legal entity in place, or in fact whether there is one there that can take that mantle. But really you do need the clear responsibilities and roles in a collaboration as well. The last point around cultural match is drawing from nation building theory, so from the Harvard Project, and that's really about understanding that there are some principles which are inherent to our tikanga that do need to be evident within a collaboration type governance model. So in thinking about all of this, it does draw a lot on complexity theory. Complexity theory is the idea that things aren't necessarily linear and things are so dynamic that you need to take an iterative approach. So you have information, you trial it out, you learn and you adapt. And so when you put that together and essentially add in other parts, you're constantly evolving as you go and learning and evolving as you implement a model. So for collaboration, starting off with what you know and constantly moving and evaluating as you move through the collaboration. So if you put together all that stuff which I've just been rambling about, you end up with something like this. Essentially it's an iterative model so that you constantly learn as you go through all those different parts. You start with a crisis or opportunity and you work through what you're actually trying to achieve as iwi o hapu organisations in that space. You address the form and so forth until you develop basically an agenda to work together in mutually reinforcing actions as a collective within that iwi o hapu space. But again, acknowledging that trust and commitment and the communication is really vital to that. This is really just reiterating what I've said, but for collaboration, it's not just about the process of collaborating, and so just having mechanical steps isn't the sole thing that you need in building a collaboration. You do need to have those conditions that help collaboration to grow. It's an adaptive process, so you learn as you move, but you do need to demonstrate that there are wins along the way so that working together, the investment, the time that you put in it, shows benefit and value. But ultimately, it is about mana and about the mana of the iwi and hapu, but also the individual organisations that make up that dynamic and that ecosystem and space. So, yeah, I had planned for a bit longer, but that's essentially the crux of it. Yeah.
Thank you, John. I think what we'll do here, whānau, is we'll have some questions now. If you have any questions for Jono or myself and the staff, I give it and then pass the time over to other people. Haramai. So, e pātoi, any comments? Any challenges? So, yes. Kia ora e hoa.
Are there some of the projects on the ground, do you think, helping with this Kingitanga? I've heard some people say that the mahi of restoring ngā awa is bringing people together. Funding the rākau and even thinking about the honey and manuka and not scrub cutting, but manuka growth as small steps towards kind of hands-on collaboration. Just mindful of all the amazing work going on in the leadership around here, coming up with the
Yeah, I think there's important collaborations, and sometimes collaboration is really just a tool to achieve a further outcome that you're trying to get to. And I think with collaborations, part of it is about creating scale and improving capacity to do things. And so, like manuka honey, working towards collaborative ventures such as that. But also involving the ground is also important, because in this space it is for the benefit of the people as much as it is for our environment as well. So I think there are multiple ways to look at it, but I think those are important developments in this type of space, but remembering that they are quite often for a particular purpose and not just for the sake of it too.
Can I just chip in on that really quickly, a response? In one of my other roles, I'm a councillor on the Badgerine Regional Council, so I do see a lot of what Iwi and Māori are doing in terms of working together for the environment. And you're right that I see a lot more happening there, genuinely happening anyway, in comparison to the economic space. And I think part of the reason is it's non-threatening. We all do care about the environment, so it's easier for our people to come together. We don't get as precious. I think you raise a good point. One of the things I'm really interested in is how do you shift that commitment beyond just a few things that we're not scared to go there with. So I just wanted to mention that for one way.
No, thank you. Also sort of, oh, fine. Sure.
Just a question, I'm a trustee on the Rotokau Trust, and I'm just wondering, as a simple document to use, like, not only collaborative thinking, would you go into something like a memorandum of understanding as a start to collaborate one trust and another? What type of, sort of up there a little bit about being clear about the roles and responsibilities, and how do you define it under the way forward?
Actually, we're just finishing the report for this. And hopefully be ready by Monday next week. So it has all our key findings. And actually back to your question, as part of our research project, we investigated or explored 10 case studies. 10 case studies of Māori organisations and a couple of non-Māori organisations collaborating, aggregating, coming together. That included Miraka, the Māori Dairy Company over at West Taupo, which is 14 trusts. The Iwi Collective Partnership, which is 16 is the amount, but Iwi Fisheries companies coming together to build scale, as well as Rotiti 15, Arapita's one of his trustees involved in, a number of trusts aggregated the land, and so on and so forth. So those are our main case studies. In order to, our criteria for these case studies were, they were at least, had a bit of time, at least 5 to 10 years behind their belt, so we could measure how well they've been doing. They've been performing well economically. We had a few other criteria, but we were looking at some actual case studies so that we could test the theory, test our framework, and then our next presenter is trying to apply them now with another case study. Which is Ngāti Pikia. It's fine.
Just towards the end of your presentation, you talked about it's not all about process. Can you just go back to what the other was then, just a little bit? It's not all about process, mostly, but it's something else.
Yeah.
Clarify that.
I think that kind of relates to their last question as well, is that we quite often look at the process in terms of we form an agreement, we do an MOU and then so forth, but a lot of it behind the scenes too is actually the conversations and having, building their trust in over amount of time. So it's that type of element too, but the conditions to build it.
And the tikanga.
Yeah.
And as Chona mentioned, with all the case studies we looked at, Ian said it took a lot of time for them to come together. Basically, it was 1 million cups of tea. Just bringing them so you could get the conditions for them. Okay, we agree now, we've sorted everything out. But as I alluded to in my opening remarks, a lot of it, or a key part of it, is acknowledging the mana of these groups, and then how do we get them to protect their mana but to blend it. The whole concept around mana whatuahu. Yeah. The questions?
Just going off in terms of the vice partner and the MOUs, and taking kind of the mold that you come up with. If you were to draft those MOUs, do you incorporate also your tikanga into those MOUs?
The case studies we looked at, they did. Tikanga was a fundamental part of all the Māori case studies. Their MOUs and their constitutions and their processes, how they operate. I add here too, some of them, they were collaborating with Māori organisations. They're also collaborating with non-Māori organisations too. So respecting that space of non-Māori and Māori and how we collaborate and the interface of them coming together. But tikanga was a key part of it all.
So with how do you deal with when you use tikanga?
Yeah, I think dispute resolution needs to be a part of it, kind of as a backstop as well. I think coming to the agreement at the beginning is actually building the foundation so you're comfortable and entering together, but also having a process around disputes as well. And I kind of think of, there's a collaboration over in British Columbia and Canada at the moment, and they've been collaborating for probably about 15 years and had disputes over time, but kind of besides the common goal that they're trying to achieve is also that dispute resolution, that they know they're going to disagree at some point, but how do you handle it?
So just adding to John's point there, all of them had some process for resolving disputes that was open, transparent and supposed to be fair. And that builds that investor confidence in the whole collaboration. And it was actually a key pillar too of the Harvard project. Looking at Indian economic development, they had what they called depoliticized dispute resolution. And acknowledged that a lot of our Māori governance entities are struggling with this part. It's inevitable you're going to have disputes. That's part of life. The issue is how do you deal with it? So you have to prepare for them. That's why we have lawyers, right? To help us with our disputes. But trying to circumvent the lawyers and being able to resolve our disputes amongst ourselves at least first. But what's key to it is it's depoliticized. It's not subject to all the tribal politics that's going on. So trying to sort that out, which is challenging. However, in saying that, Waikato-Tainui with their recent governance review have been trying to do just that. Establish as independent as you can get, an independent dispute resolution forum. And so that's how you resolve those differences of opinion regarding tikanga and regarding a whole bunch of other issues. Other pātai? Yes.
I'm just sort of wondering what sort of challenges do you foresee trying to encourage greater iwi collaboration with socially a wide variety of levels? What sort of key challenges do you see maintaining that collaboration with a lot of iwi different size is actually pushing for more sovereign iwi?
I know that's a rather complex question, but I think they will all have because of their dynamics, each of them will have a different thing, but I think some of the ones that you've already drawn out, I think, are like the power balance. And I think it really comes down to what the cause is as well, because sometimes the purpose of the collaboration can override the, what am I trying to say?
What's the whole purpose of the collaboration? Is it economic? Is it social? Is it cultural? Is it a combination? From some of our overseas research we've looked at for Harvard project again, and a couple of UN projects, what they look at is it's ideally, at the end of the day, what you're trying to create is a strong nation of your tribe, be it Ngāti Porou, Ngāti Maniapoto, whoever. A strong nation which is healthy, out of jail, educated, well educated, financially secure, strong in their tikanga, strong in their reo, all of those factors, which is the vision of a lot of the tribes. The key is how do you achieve that? And as you would have known, for those who attended the presentation this morning with the Rahui, what Waikato-Tainui is doing now is they're going into the social social space, trying to deal with your children and other areas, which is really important. But it's not just, well, I know we're going off our kaupapa here, but it's not just about economic development. It's economy, it's a means to an end, not an end in and of itself.
Sorry, I just want to head into this. I think there's many issues that we need to face around how we collaborate. One of the ones I think a lot about is how we reconcile our natural structures, Māori structures, into collaboration. So from a Māori perspective, within a niwi, you have hapu. And actually, that's where the mana is, that's where things happen, that's where the marae is. And how do you give mana to a hapu at the same time that you give mana to a niwi, and then give mana to several iwi working together? Now, I don't have the exact answer to that, but I'll probably pick up on some of it when I talk specifically about the Ngāti Pūkeo situation, because I've seen this stuff at play on the ground within my own iwi and hapu.
I think just adding to that as well, so the British Columbia collaboration that I'm talking about, they because through the collaboration they acknowledge the mana of each of the different groups that participate, so they can scale up and work together, or they can scale down and work as kind of at the hapu level. And so actually having that flexibility through collaboration can help acknowledge that mana, rather than something like amalgamation where you kind of come together and there are questions about whether the identity at the other levels do still exist. So collaboration can provide a mechanism to acknowledge the mana at each level.
And mana whatu ahuru issue again. They said our kaupapa for this project was some type of model to help them collaborate, to help them come together. Those dynamics, those mechanics, not the purpose for it, that's key, but how do you actually get them to do it? And as I said, it's part of our tikanga, it's part of our history, but it's actually a challenge, quite a challenge to do in practice. And so on that note, whānau, it's good lead into our next presenter, which is the Arapita Tahana. He's from Te Aroa, Ngāti Pūkeo and Ngāti Makino. Arapita is he's a council on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. He's a trustee of a number of trusts. And is very dynamic in terms of the leadership of his hapu, actually the iwi. Te Aroa. So he's one of the movers and shakers, actually, should describe him. But with our project, we've been collaborating and working with Ngāti Pūkeo, and we've been working closely with Arapita. It has been a privilege working with them too and seeing how Ngāti Pūkeo works, and we're coming in to assist them with the co-production of this model, this report. And it's not us writing it, we're all writing it and participating in the whole process together. So on that note, we'll pass the time over now to Arapita. There's some more pātai after that.
Tēnā koe, Robert. E kia ana ko te moringi ki mua, ko te hapai o ki muri. He oi anō, ka tika kia whakawhetai atu ki tātu i runga rawa. He hōnore, he kōria ki aia, he maunga rongo ki runga i te mata te whenua. He whakaaro pai ki a tātou katoa. Tua roa ke, ka whakaaro ake ki te wāhi ngaro. Rātou kua hinga atu i ngā wiki ngā marama kua pahure ake nei. Pīkau tia o koutou mate, kia poroporo aki ka tangihia anō. Nō reira e te hunga mate, haere, oki atu. Nā ka huri o ku whakaaro ki te Kingitanga, ki Kingitu heitea, e noho ana i runga i tahu rewa tapu, nei rā te mihi atu ki a koe, me o tūpuna. Tēnei rā te mihi atu ki a tātou te hungora, me ki ngā mana ngā reo, ngā maunga, kai waingi i a tātou, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Ko wai tēnei e tuake nei, me ki pēnei, ko mata whaura te maunga, ko te roti i te kita i henga te moana, ko te kaituna te awa, ko ngā te tamatea tūtahi kawiti me ngā te hinukura ngā hapu, ko ngā te piki ao te iwi, he uri hoki au no ngā te mākino, no tapuika, mai te wako o Te Aroa. Nō reira, tēnei rā te miha tiki a tātou katoa. Okay, whānau, firstly, I'm conscious that we're on the graveyard shift and I just had a big hangi before I came here, so I'm feeling pretty tired. You fellas might be feeling pretty tired, so I'm going to be a hoha, make everyone stand up briefly, do a little bit of exercise before I have a kōrero. Hopefully then the ears are a bit more open and we're a little bit more alive. Ka pai, so if you've got a pen, hold a pen in your hand. If you don't have a pen, kai te pai, just put a finger in there. Right, want you to turn it around clockwise. Am I doing it clockwise? Yep, that's clockwise. Ka pai. I hope we all know what clockwise is. I had to think about it. Right? Keep turning it clockwise and bring your finger down so it's below your face, so you're down here. And have a look. Are you still turning clockwise? Kyle? So you didn't stop turning it anywhere, but it's going a different way now that it's down here, eh? Ka pai. Kids, sit down. Does anyone know the moral to that exercise? Or the purpose of the exercise rather than the moral? It's about changing perspectives. Depending on how we look at things, we can see them from different perspectives. I'm not sure if that blends into the kōrero I'm going to have. I just thought I needed a bit of movement before I had a kōrero, but I'll try and weave it in somehow. I'll just give you a little bit of background before I speak about this particular project. So my name's Arapita Tahana. I grew up at Rotiti. Rotiti's a small community just out of Rotorua. I'm privileged to be brought up amongst my whānau, live in an area where, well, the kura that I went to, everybody was your cousin. So very much grew up within the midst of my hapu, my whānau, and very grassroots, very rural community, very Māori community. I actually came to university here when I was 18 or so. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I left school. And when I went to the careers advisors, they just threw up a whole lot of options, and I didn't really know what I was about, what I was passionate about, where I wanted to go with my life. So I thought management was pretty generic. If I do management, I can probably branch off into a whole lot of different things and apply it however. So I did come here for about 6 months, which probably tells you the story where that ended. I did continue with my business management degree, but I did it back through Wairiki, back in Rotorua. I raised that because my initial interest, career-wise, was around business. Over time, however, it's become more so about people, about community, and particularly about hapu and iwi, but how you integrate Māori values into the way that we do business. So that's what I want to kind of talk quite a bit about as I go through this kaupapa. And just in terms of some of my background and roles and how I know a little bit about Marty Land Trusts, probably for the last 10 years, maybe 15 years, I've been working with Marty Land Trusts. I've worked with over 100 land trusts throughout the Bay of Plenty. I worked for a period with Te Tumu Pairo, the Māori trustee, and that gave me exposure to working with Marty Land Trusts right throughout the Bay of Plenty. Prior to that, it was largely just within Ngāi Te Pikiao that I'd work with them. And most of the work that I do is around strategy, business planning. And although we use the term strategy and business planning, I don't really think it's about that. It's more so about clarifying what it is that we really want. What's the purpose? Why do we exist? Why do these land trusts exist? What are we trying to achieve for our people? And that's a really big focus for me. And that's where things like mana, things like our values of as Māori, I'm big on how do we integrate them into the commercial world? How do we take them into the boardroom? Because over a decade of working and advising Māori trusts, some of our practice in the boardroom doesn't reflect our tikanga, our kawa. It doesn't reflect what you see on the marae. And in fact, so I can't remember the exact question, but around models of collaboration, I often use the marae as a good example of when you look at a marae and how that operates, how things work so smoothly, what it is we can learn from there to take into the boardroom. And a good example for me is, or not an example, but a good learning for me is the understanding of kawa and tikanga and how that applies in the boardroom. Now, I've got my own understanding of kawa and tikanga, or own interpretation, and it may differ from others, and kei te pai tēnā, but what I got taught was kawa doesn't change. Kawa are the core values, the core principles that we operate by. Tikanga is the way that we choose to express those values, and tikanga can change depending on the times or the circumstances. And it's something that I think the way I see us practice tikanga in other contexts outside of the marae, I think we get wrong because we don't understand the kawa properly. We don't understand the underlying values that drive that. I'll come back to all of this as I go through this kōrero about this particular project. So you've already heard a little bit about Te Pai Tawhiti. This project we've been working on for the last couple of years, at least with this group, but it's something I've been involved with for probably the last decade. It's something that my father had started, he's now passed, and in fact it was there long before it. And it was really about how does Ngāti Pikiao, in terms of our land trust and different entities that we have, how do we better work together to achieve our different aspirations? So, whaia te pai tawhiti kia tata, whakamaua te pai tata kia tēnā. The whole purpose of this was to explore the possibilities of our future if we were to work together, and then to think through how do we realise those opportunities. And from an economic perspective, this was the rationales or the hypothesis. The thinking was that if you can achieve greater collaboration, if you can also achieve active management and good governance, then the likelihood is that you'll be able to either increase income, decrease expenses, make more money, and have enhanced economic performance. That's a process to get better economics. That's not the purpose of the kaupapa. The purpose of the kaupapa is to give greater benefits to the people. Economics is one avenue for getting there. Just to put Pikiao land in context, and we're very fortunate within Ngāti Pikiao. So for those of you who don't know kind of where this is in the country, this is Lake Rotorua, Lake Rotoiti, Rotoehu and Rotomā. This is the rohe of Ngāti Pikiao, and you'll notice a little star next to the Ngāti Pikiao context. It's also Ngāti Rongomai and Ngāti Tarawhai. Growing up there, we didn't differentiate. We all, because the whakapapa is so close, we all work together, but then when we get treaty settlements, different iwi want to pop up and have their mana, so I've got to acknowledge the various iwi. Anyway, just some interesting facts in terms of Marty land within Ngāti Pikiao. We're fortunate that we still have about 90% of the land pre-Europeans coming. The land that we have within our tribal rohe, most of it we still have in our ownership. We didn't lose it through raupatu. We didn't lose it through sales of the land, or not significant amounts anyway. And just to give you a bit of the context and the rationale for that, one was good strategic thinking on some of our leaders' part, but Taurua as a whole, when Europeans started to come into our rohe, we were very clear at that time anyway, when you read the history, that we would never sell land. We were open to leasing it, but we'd never sell it. Interestingly enough though, over the years, a lot of the iwi within Taurua have lost their land or have sold their land for whatever reason. In our case, we're very lucky that we've held on to 90% of it. So there's 25,000 hectares of Māori land within the Pikiao rohe. There's only 55,000 hectares of Māori land in the whole Rotorua district. So half of the whole Rotorua, or Māori land within the Rotorua district, half of it is within Pikiao. We're only one iwi of 13 odd iwi within Taurua. But it's a bit of a, I suppose, a testament to our staunchness around how we hold on to our land and the importance it plays in our lives. There were a few really smart strategies in terms of different leaders over the centuries that have helped us to keep this position. We're known as, Taurua was known as kupapa in some of the land wars that we went with the Crown. I don't have an opinion about whether that was right or wrong, but I am very grateful for the fact that we still have a lot of our land, and part of it is because of that. Because we sided with the Crown, we didn't get impacted. But beyond that, we were also smart in the way that we work with Pākehā organisations. So I'm a councillor in one of my roles, and there's a lot of co-governance frameworks coming up nowadays where iwi sit alongside councils to manage different natural resources. Ngāti Pikiao as an iwi, we're doing this 100 years ago. So back in 1906, we set up a number of scenic reserves, the Department of Conservation. The terms of those scenic reserves is that we'll sit on the governance, and so we'll sit at the table to make the decisions about how things happen. So I think in terms of blending the way we work and working with others, we've been quite successful at that over time. The other thing that you see within Pikiao is the size of our iwi. So there's 8,000 people within Ngāti Pikiao. We've got 13 marae around this lake. We've got probably the most marae, or biggest concentration of marae throughout all of Taurua. 4 lakes, several scenic reserves, all of that Māori land. 382 land blocks make up all of those Māori land blocks. Of that, I'll skip this. This is some stats on Pikiao. Of those 382 land blocks, there's probably only about 70 that are economically active. So there's a lot of blocks that are just whānau papakainga blocks, urupa reservations, marae reservations, or other forms of reservations. This is a bit boring, but 382 land blocks, 70 economically active. There's 155 governance structures. So when you think about trying to collaborate, there's potentially 155 different groups to pull together to do that. One of the reasons I wanted to do this project is because within Pigiao, although we have a lot of land, not too many of our people are conscious of that, are conscious of our collective scale and the strength that we have if we were to work together better. And so I've pulled together some of these numbers, largely for ourselves, to get an understanding of how big we are. These numbers relate to some analysis I did on 11 of those 70 economically active trusts. To make things easy, I just went to the 11 that I have whakapapa to, because I'm allowed their annual report, so I can use that information. It was easier than trying to collect the whole 70, but it was very useful for this. So out of those 11 trusts, $200 million in assets, 16 million in revenue every year, 13 million net surplus, so profit. If you looked at any one of those organisations by themselves, they don't have the scale, a lot of them, to do anything major, to have a huge impact. But when you look at us together, we could make some huge impacts on our people, or for our people, rather. This just gives you an idea of the various assets that we have, that we're active with, so where we are, that we own and we manage it, because there's a lot of it's passive. These are the ones that are active, so we have dairy farms. Ironically though, a lot of our dairy farms actually aren't within our rohe. We have about 2 within our own rohe. The other dairy farms we bought outside of the rohe. We're having a debate at the moment about whether we should be in dairy at all because of the paru that it puts into our water. The major asset within Pigiao is forestry. A lot of our land isn't that good for pastoral purposes. Quite a lot of steep, hilly stuff. We're also fortunate that we sit on a number of geothermal springs. So there's 3 geothermal areas or geothermal power plants that are under exploration phase or negotiation phase at the moment. We also have some dry stock farms. One of the probably more interesting economic assets that we have is leasehold properties. So within our rohe, there's around 200 leasehold properties that we have. If any of you have driven through Rotokau, Lake Rotokau, pretty much every house along that line is all still land that we own. We just lease it out. These are some of the passive assets that we have. One of the things I wanted to do in this project was to have a look at where our common expenditure is. Because with those 70 economically active trusts, we all pay for our own stuff separately. We all do our own stuff. We all have our own accountants, or we're using the same accountant, but we don't have any, we haven't done any kind of collective procurement and gone to these accountants and said, we're bringing you 30 trusts, you give us a better deal. So they've just picked us off one by one and we all pay whatever we pay. So here's a quick snapshot out of those 11 trusts. 400,000 spent on accounting and secretarial between them, 200,000 on various business advisors, forestry consultants, farming, 60K on insurance, 50K on printing and stationery. Yet we don't get together and say, hey, let's get a bargain with the printers, let's get a bargain with the accountants or the secretarials, or even better, over time, let's establish our own accounting and secretarial service. We're big enough, we're spending enough money on it, we could be doing it ourselves. And then this was distributions in the particular year that I looked at. So how much money are we giving out? And this is a big kaupapa for me, because it's one thing to have a big balance sheet, but big balance sheets don't make a difference in your people's homes. I'm interested in how much money you're actually getting out to whānau, and how well are we doing it? What are the methods that we're using to make a difference? So out of these 11 trusts, about 1.9 million was distributed in this one particular year across those various areas. You'll see kaumatua's the biggest of all of these. $1 million went to our kaumatua. Education in there, marae in there. One of the interesting things in Pigiao is where we've got a lot of our old values that we practice. So the kaumatua one was about looking after our old people. And you'll see 1 million, half of all of the distributions are going to our koeke and our kaumatua. I support that from a value perspective about respect your elders, look after your elders. They've given so much to us. but strategically I don't know whether it's the best thing for us to be doing, that we actually need to help all generations, not just our own. We need to think about how we do that. One of the reasons, in a sceptical way I'll say this, one of the reasons a lot of trusts like this one is because your voters, your landowners, majority of them are over 65, so you give good pūtea for kaumātua, chances are you'll get in again. But that's not a reason to do it, whānau. Just a few examples of collaboration within Pikiao. I'm the chair of Rotokau 15, our block's about 8,000 hectares out of that 25,000 hectares. It's really the biggest Marty Len block in the Rotorua district. That block is a result of an aggregation of 33 smaller blocks. And in terms of collaboration and why we collaborate, one of the biggest reasons why Māori have collaborated historically is out of crisis, out of the fear of losing something, having to come together to defend ourselves. And that was very much the reason why Rotokau 15 came together. We were at the risk of losing some of our land to the county borough or the council at the time for unpaid rates. And a lot of these small blocks, they weren't able to raise the money. They found it very hard to even raise leases because some of the small blocks were landlocked and so forth. So back in 1971, this was the time of my karaua was involved in all of this, we decided to bring those 33 smaller blocks together and we leased them to Tasman, which is a forestry mill in Kawarau. And that basically gave us the money to get rid of all of those unpaid rates and to make us some money into the future. There are a number of examples like that within Pikiao, so Taheke HC, Ōkere Incorporation. A number of our blocks were originally several smaller blocks that came together. Te Runanga o Ngāti Pikiao, which was one of the earliest runanga to be established in the country, and the purpose there was to bring Pikiao together, to have an umbrella organisation that could support all of Pikiao's development. There are also a few business ventures and different examples in that space that we've done. There's a collective of trusts that invest in property together. My trust, or Rotokau 15 rather, is involved in the geothermal collective. So where there are 3 trusts, on the border of our 3 trusts is a geothermal spring, the potential for power generation, and we work together. Again, interesting background to that, it didn't start that way. It started off each trust kind of fighting with each other and the various power companies to try and get the best deal, until we kind of slapped ourselves in the face and said, hey, we're all cousins here, what the hell are we doing? And I think I'm seeing a lot of that within Pikiao. In fact, I'm seeing it across the board, that there's more and more of us realising that competition amongst ourselves just totally doesn't make sense, and that we need to let go of some of the past raru. Because even within these whānau and the various whānau that I work with, we've got historical raru, but in my generation we've said to each other, waiho tēnā, nā rātou we rā raru. That was our father's generation, that was our karaua's generation. It doesn't serve our people right now for us to continue this raru. Oh, actually, and a couple of other ones that Rotokau 15 are involved in, and not even within our own rohe. So we've done a JV with a small trust in Te Puke to form a dairy farm over there. We're also involved in kiwi fruit orchards down in Omaio and Te Kaha. It's a big part of our strategy, and I'll talk a little bit about our strategy later on. In terms of this project and having the kōrero with Pikiao trustees, we wanted to see what trustees thought were the key opportunities of coming together. And these are the things that came out. And you'll probably find this amongst any collective of land trusts. So shared accounting, secretarial and advisory services, a shared information platform, shared resources, investments, procurement, leveraging our influence. One of the things that we've never done with councils, for instance, is made them aware of the rates that we're paying collectively. I've done this, I've looked at the data for Taurua collectively. Taurua Māori land blocks collectively contribute 2.5 million in rates to our council every year. But we've never got together and used that collective leverage and influence. This is probably the guts of it all. What are the challenges? What are the things that are holding us back? And I think they're probably not peculiar purely to Māori. You'll see them in a lot of forms of collaboration. Attitudes, mindsets and perceptions is the biggest one. I suppose to summarise that, I'd call it ego. we get caught up in, oh, this is about me being the best, it's about my little patch in Pikiao. I've had this debate with my own trustees around our distribution policy, and we give out a lot of money to kaumātua, and I was challenging that one for a number of reasons. And one of the arguments that came up was, oh yeah, but we're the only one that gives so much to our kaumātua. That's why we're held up as one of the best trusts in Pikiao. And I said, our purpose is not to be better than our neighbours. Our purpose is to be better than we were yesterday, and to help our neighbours come with us for them to be better, not to compete. Communication. Whilst we communicate, I don't think we communicate about the right things and that we go deep enough on that communication. The biggest issue for me is leadership. And when I look historically at some of the things that we did, at the heart of all of those things were very strong leaders in our past. So our block Rotisi 15, that amalgamation of 33 land blocks, there were 10 people at that meeting. There's 13,000 owners in that block, but back in 71, 10 people made the decision, and it was largely leaders within our community. We need more of that leadership, that willingness to stand up, to promote the stuff, to make it happen, to overcome the challenges. I've been involved in a number of attempts at collaboration, and people fall over as soon as stuff gets a bit scary. As soon as we start having a bit of a whawhai everyone, I'll go home, forget about it. That's not leadership. Stay in the room, work it out. I don't have all the answers on how to do it, but we require stronger leadership to achieve it. Owner engagement and buy-in. If we want to achieve collaboration, we need to take our owners with it. That's why we're doing this. It's all to benefit our owners and the whenua. We need to have the buy-in from them. And I've seen examples where owners have tried to turn trusts away from collaboration purely out of the fear that they'll lose their ownership rights. They see it as, oh, if we get lumped in with them, then I'll just become one of that big group and I lose my identity. Trustees, and really that's trustees as leaders in the space. And then strategy. One of the things that's really missing within Pikiao is strategy. When you have a kōrero with Pikiao trustees, we all believe in collaboration. Everyone's keen to do it, but we don't have the strategies in place, and we're not taking the action down that path. And a lot of it comes back to leadership. When we asked what are the critical success factors right now to achieve collaboration, these were the three things that came out. Understanding the collective picture, which I mentioned earlier. A lot of our trusts don't understand what we look like when you look at us collectively. Getting a shared strategy and having the buy-in across all of our trusts with that. And then intergenerational leadership, that we need strong leaders, and we need strong leaders not just for today's time, but also for tomorrow. I'll bring this back to, I suppose, a practical example that I'm involved in. This is Rotisi 15's, an overview of our strategic direction. And the importance, I suppose, of tikanga and kawe and Māori values in the way that we plan, because a lot of our planning started from that point. And I've been involved in a lot of trusts thinking about strategic plans, thinking about investment strategies, and I find a lot of it starts from the wrong point, largely because our advisors don't understand this stuff. In terms of our vision, collective action, wealth and well-being. What we want to see is not only our trusts being wealthy and having well-being for our people, we want to see that collectively. From our perspective, we know that we can't make a big enough impact for our people. We've got 13,000 owners. There's no way we're going to be able to make a meaningful impact for them. On the flip side, we know that they also whakapapa to a lot of the blocks around us. So if we're working together, we can have greater impact. We need to do this collectively. So right from the outset, we're putting that out there. Actually, sorry, to put this in context, when I started on this trust about 6 years ago, the vision was to be the leading economic player in the Central North Island. And why? I don't really care about being the leading economic player. I care about wealth and well-being, and I care about happening right across the board. So it's taken us some time to shift the thinking within our trust to getting something that's more authentic and more linked to who we are as people. On the left-hand side, bottom left-hand side there is our various strategic objectives, so where we focus our effort and divide up the various mahi that we do. Kia tupu, so that's focused on growing our assets and growing our cash flow. Just a quick point about that, no point in growing assets if you can't grow cash flow. There's a lot of Māori land trusts and entities that have great balance sheets, $100 million on there. How much cash is flowing out of that? And how much cash is then flowing on to the people? Kia ngātahi, that's about working together, developing strategic partnerships, working with our own. Kia toha toha, making sure that we distribute and give out, so contributing to our people, culture and environment. Even with this one, we've changed the whakaaro a bit compared to what I've seen in some trusts. So some trusts, a lot of trusts have some form of distribution policy, but a lot of their distribution, the wealth that they're giving out, is focused on giving it to the people, to the owners. We've slightly changed that and said it's about our people being our owners, but also broader. It's the communities, the hapu that they live in. It's about our culture and it's about our environment. So we now have a policy where we don't only give money to individuals, we also give money to our marae, we give money for environmental purposes. In fact, as a trust, we were already giving money to our marae, where we give out, we've got 12 marae that affiliate to this block. They all get $5,000 a year to do whatever for their operational costs and so forth. But we also make available $50,000 a year for any major upgrades that they need to do on their marae. So that's only $50,000 that's available to any one of them. They've got to apply each year to get that. And then finally, kia puawai, developing the capacity and capability to deliver our vision. And this is something in the land trust space that not many of our trusts are doing. Many of our trusts only have a governance structure in place. All of the management, all the people doing mahi, we're contracting that out. It's the accountants, it's the secretarial services, it's advisors and so forth. Our trust, our aim is to have all of our own capacity in place, so we're not having to go, well, at least probably 80% in-house. It's going to take us time to build that. We're currently in the process of recruiting a general manager, and we have a number of other strategies that we're looking at with other trusts around shared services and so forth. Because it's funny, we talk a lot about creating jobs within these trusts, and ironically we already create a whole lot of jobs. They're just not, we don't have no control over them. We're paying other people who then employ a whole lot of other people. So over time we want to build that. The top right hand corner there is our mission, kia tiaki, kia tuputupu, kia toha toha. And I'd argue at a really high level that this is pretty much the same mission for a lot of trusts. One is to protect, in the sense of protecting that whenua, the cultural sacredness of it. Another part is about growing, both in an economic sense but in a whole lot of other ways. And then the final part is around contribution. Then finally, and probably most importantly, are our values. Kia whakamana te tangata, that we respect and value people. Kia tina te kaitiakitanga, we act with integrity. Kia tapu te whenua, we value the sacredness of land. Kia tū maia, we are courageous. And kia ngātahi te whakaaro me te mahi, we believe in working together. There's a couple of quick points on there. The kia tū maia, about being courageous. One of the things that we've seen in this space is a lack of leadership, a lack of willingness to try things that are new, a lack of willingness to push through the barriers that are before us. And as a trust, we're trying our best to have courage in that space, to do the things that others sometimes are too afraid to do. And just relating this stuff back to distributions and what we give out to our people, that 2015 year doesn't look too good. On average, it's only because a couple of years got lumped together in 2014, but on average we've given out around about 500,000 a year to our people through these various forms, so to our marae, to our koeke or kaumātua, to our community organisations. So we give money to the key community organisations within our rohe, our rugby clubs, our league clubs, our hunting clubs, because those are important parts of our community. And then we have the discretionary space where we can give it out for a whole lot of different kaupapa. We also have a bit of education in there as well. But as a trust, and having worked with a number of trusts, we're probably one of the better ones in terms of making sure that our profits get out to our people. We give out 40% of our net profit every year, regardless of what it is. So if it's big, it's big. If it's small, it's small. That works both for the trust and for the people, because we share the ups and downs. But that 40% figure, having worked with a number of trusts, is quite high. A lot of the ones that I've worked with, or particularly the bigger ones, ironically, tend to be smaller, tend to be around the 10 to 20%. And again, I'd argue there's no point in having a big balance sheet if you're not getting benefits out to your people. Right, so that's a bit about Ruriri 15, that's a bit about Pikiao. I just want to come back to Te Mana Ahuru and this blending of Māori mana, Māori values and Western values and the other things that we learn from the global world. One of the things I want to say first up is that I think that Māori values should be the dominant drivers of our strategy. When we talk about where we're going and how we're going to get there, we should be using our Māori values. We should start from that point. In order to do that, however, we need to have a better understanding and better practice of our values. Like I said, if you go to a marae, you watch how a tangihanga operates, how smoothly things work. We don't seem to be able to replicate that in economic spaces and other spaces. There is some learning in that when you have a look at what's in behind that. Why do we have the commitment when it comes to a marae? Why do we accept the various roles that we have on a marae? And why does it run so smoothly? We need to take those learnings and apply them in the boardroom. The other thing that I'd say is that we need to make tikanga and kawa living beyond ritual and protocol. So we often talk about tikanga and kawa, but we only really practice it within certain rituals and protocols. You see it at a tangihanga, you see it in the boardroom when we start with the karakia and we end with the karakia. But I'd argue that if you're true to your tikanga and kawa, these are values, these are ways of being. You can't do it just over here. You just pull it out when you need to and okay, let's do the karakia. You need to be living by those values all the time. So if you believe in aroha, you believe in manakitanga, you should be doing that wherever you are. Not just when we have the protocol for it or the ritual for it. This stuff might sound simple, but that's my observation. We don't do it enough. And unfortunately, we have some leaders out there that will put tikanga and kawa pehu. This stuff's really important, but they don't always practice it. We need to be stauncher around that. Tikanga and kawa isn't something you roll out as a protocol or ritual and you do it now and again. It's got to be part of your everyday life. And it can take many forms. It doesn't have to be in the form of karakia. For some of us, it's getting up early and doing karakia. But it can be done in a whole lot of different ways. Showing aroha can be very simple. Can be being appreciative of people. Can be giving them a smile. We need to practice this stuff in everything that we do. The kupu mana, I think we've got to reinterpret, well, it's up to everyone to interpret it however they can, but my interpretation of mana, when I compare it to what you look at in the dictionary, so the common translation for it is power and authority, I'd argue that that's not mana. That's the outcome of mana. Mana is responsibility. How well you exercise your responsibilities will result in some form of mana, or power and authority. And it won't even be you that creates that, it's the people that will give you that mana. That simple shift in thinking, because I've worked around a number of people who are mana hungry, perhaps, and it's about getting the title, it's about being the person in the front. For me, it's about doing your mahi well, and doing it with good intent. We need to explore these values and get to understand them better, and bring them into life, into the way that we do things, beyond our protocols and rituals. Tikanga and kawa isn't just a place for the marae. It isn't just for things that we do on the marae or within kaupapa Māori. It's something that we should be practicing everywhere we go. I'll leave it there. That's been a little bit random, sorry whānau. I've been a bit crook lately, so I didn't have much time to prepare. Hopefully there was some useful stuff in there, but perhaps through some questions and answers we can refine it a little bit more. Ni pātai? Any disagreements? Because kōrero's good, whether we agree or not. The more we kōrero about these things, the more enlightened we become. Kia ora.
You spoke a bit about needing a futures focus kind of outlook and the lack of rangatira. Are there any kind of processes within PBs and within trusts to really promote rangatahi within that as an organisation? Like you look at big businesses and organisations that have these graduate roles and internships to get rangatahi into better positions, but within kind of a trust, is there anything set up to help promote that?
There are some strategies that are emerging along those lines. So one is associate trusteeships, so that are specifically focused on rangatahi. So they effectively come and sit alongside the trustees, do all the same mahi as the trustees as a way of blooding them in and giving them some learning. Another one that our trust is quite interested in is with education scholarships. we give out scholarships, but there's no pathway for our people to come back into either internships or jobs. So we're thinking hard about how do we create those jobs. Now, one of the ways that we're doing it is taking all of the money that we're already paying people and creating jobs and trying to build that ourselves, e.g. the accounting service, the secretarial service, do all of that ourselves. That way we've got the jobs to plug them back in. One other way that we do it is with the business partners that we work with. So we work with a lot of big forestry companies, geothermal, power companies, whole range of different companies. With some of them, we're pushing them to set up internships for our people to come back in. That said, none of it's really rolling that well yet. But there needs to be that focus of bringing our rangatahi in. Within Mairoa, within Pigiao, in the last 10 years or so, there's been a huge shift in terms of younger generations coming into the trustee space. So, and I'm probably a bit of an anomaly compared to a lot of the age groups of trustees. So typically, actually, I did some work about 6 years ago on Taurua trusts, and we looked at the median age of governors on various entities. The median age was 64, I think it was. I'm 35, so I'm 30 years too early, I suppose. But I'm seeing that across the board within Pikiao at least, that we're getting a lot more of our younger generations coming through, but that's a result of our older generations saying, actually, we need to let go here. We don't have the right skill set. We need to bring our young people in. There's a real groundswell of that happening within Pikiao, and it's not just in this trustee space, it's happening in terms of our paipai, but it's kind of taken a bit of crisis to make that happen. Cool. Sure.
You mentioned the sort of governance agreements with local city council.
Yeah, I think mixed results. A lot of them are too early to tell, in my opinion. So in terms of the regional, Bay of Plenty Regional Council, most of our co-governance arrangements have only been operating for 3 or 4 years. I think there are certain ways they've already added value. Now, one is changing the perception of natural resource management. Māori have a very different perspective on how we think about our awa and our maunga and our ngahere and so forth. And one of the simple ones is that they're part of our whakapapa. If you understand the whakapapa back to Ranginui, our land, our awa, our maunga, they all came before us, but we're all linked, we're all part of that whakapapa. So I think our mātauranga Māori, our ways of thinking is having an impact on councils around thinking differently. The challenge that we're going through at the moment is how to integrate that with science and law. Because that, at the end of the day, that's how councils work. It's about regulation, it's about science, empirical evidence to say, yes, we should do this and whatnot. A good example of one area where we're starting to do that is Ngāti Mākino have done some work around the flow levels of the Waitahanui River. And what they've done is they've had people go out and observe the river at certain times and noted their views on whether the mauri of the river was, out of 1 to 10, do you think it's healthy? Do you think it's paru? And so forth. And then they've married that up against the science data at the same time to see what does the actual data say at the same time that we feel that things are right. So that's starting to bring the two together, and ironically, there's a whole lot of similarities. The other thing we've done also on the tauranga moana side of things, we have Chris Battershall, who's a professor from Waikato. He's based down in Tauranga, who works with our council on a whole lot of environmental management things. He works closely with a number of iwi people, and he's probably the best person to talk to in terms of a Pākehā who understands science really well and the value of mātauranga Māori. A simple example that I can think of is during the Rena disaster, and in terms of where they expected pollution to turn up, it was the haukainga, was the people from there that said to them, this is where we're going to start seeing problems, because they understood the way that the sea moves. When the sea's going this way, te mea, te mea. And he said that was hugely helpful for them. They were able to pinpoint areas and get there quicker. So, I think it's pretty exciting times over the next wee while as we learn how to, both us and Pākehā learn how to integrate our knowledge with their knowledge. Because I think there's some real value in our stuff, just as much as there is in science and in the Western world. Yep. Just another kaupapa is probably a better kaupapa for me to talk about in terms of collaboration. The Taurua Partnership, so that's a recent development in terms of Taurua's relationship with the Rotorua Lakes Council that we developed over the last year or so. But within that whole process was really a process of collaboration amongst Taurua to get us to agree on a model and then come together to form a partnership with the council. And there's a few things within that that I think is relevant to some of the questions that have come up today. The rangatahi one. So within this board that we've created to represent Taurua's views with the council, there's 14 members, 2 of them are rangatahi. There aren't any other Taurua entities that have spots for rangatahi, whereas this is guaranteed. We made sure that there was a space for them. There was also a different construct in how we made up that membership. So typically it's kind of an at-large. If you're from Taurua, you're in there. We changed that. We said 2 seats of these 14 will go to Ngāti Whakaue. The reason for that was Ngāti Whakaue gifted the land to create the township of Rotorua, so it was acknowledging our history, the important part that Ngāti Whakaue played in the establishment of Rotorua, respecting, I suppose, Māori mana as opposed to Pākehā democracy mana, which might say make it at large and make it fair for everybody. We had another space that was 6 at-large seats for anyone from Taurua. We had 2 seats that were specifically for our land trusts, so that we had that voice coming into the picture. We had another seat that was specifically for our kaumātua. So creating these new models that align better with the way that we think, with our natural structures. Part of that, however, requires some debate amongst ourselves about our own understanding of ourselves, to be quite frank. I think some of our whakaaro about who we are, but we wawa from where those whakaaro originally came from. And it's not for me to say this is how it should be for anyone. That's for every hapu whānau to work it out themselves. But in my experience here, I've seen we twist some of our own stuff and not for good.
In terms of aligning yourself up with your visions and your mission statements, so I guess it could be a pathway for so looking at your distribution or your financial distributions here on the PowerPoint, do you think that it would be viable enough to formulate a module of to measure cultural capital? So that goes further, so you see where the money's going, but in terms of what since you started giving the money to work, has that extended life expectancy, or since giving it to giving the education grants, has Ngāti Whakaue acquired more jobs? Just looking forward.
It's a huge area that needs more focus, and we need to do exactly that. So one of the actions for our trusts in the next year is to do a piece of research around understanding, I suppose, in Pākehā terms, the social impact of the money that we're giving out, or the cultural impact. You're bang on, e hoa, because if you look at it, the way that a lot of our trusts give money out, we're kind of all doing the same old. We need some scholarships, give some money to the marae. But what real benefit is that making? Now, one of the reasons I keep asking myself this question is I've grown up in my rohe and I still live there today, and there aren't the people, just population-wise, there's not as many people that live in our rohe anymore than when I was a kid. Our school rolls 44 now, it was 120 when I was a kid. Why is it that even though economically we're doing pretty well, why is it that all our people have to go and get jobs in Australia? Why is it that the ones that are left here, a lot of them are struggling? There's a mismatch. I've seen, I don't know the empirical data, but there's a graph that basically looks one line going like this, another line going like this. This line is the Māori economy. It's growing. This line is Māori well-being. It's maybe flat, probably slightly going backwards. There's an issue here, whānau. No point making lots of money if our people still pohara in their hearts. I don't care about, we don't have to be rich money-wise, but we should be wealthy in terms of being happy, in terms of knowing who we are and so forth. So anyone who has the answers or who wants to look at that question and work on it, I think that's a critical question for Māori over the next 100 years, because we're doing the economic stuff, but it is of no value if it's not going to change the well-being of our people.
Actually, that's a good PhD thesis for you. Cool. So it's a good place for us to finish. Hana, we're getting most stuff past. Just before we finish though, if our two presenters can come forward. Appreciation we have these gifts for you. to show our appreciation.